Hello, everyone, and welcome to 360ed.tv. My name is Chooks, and I'll be your host for today's episode. We're going to start a conversation with regards to learning ecosystems, environments, and spaces. I have the warm pleasure of introducing Ellen Terrell, who is the manager of learning ecosystems at Swinburne University of Technology. Hello, Ellen.
Hello, Chuck. Great to be able to talk to you today.
Excellent. So we're exploring learning ecosystems. But before we get into that, let's get to meet Ellen. Can you give us a little bit about your background and what excites you about the work you currently do?
I've got the ideal job, to be honest. I love it so much. So my background is in architecture. I practiced at some well-known companies like John Wardle and Cox, who do a lot of really wonderful public projects, educational projects. So I worked a lot of educational buildings there, like in different aspects of it. And I, in parallel, was a sessional teacher at University of Melbourne. So I was often teaching and working at the same time. I decided to join those two passions about 3 years ago. I did a grad cert in learning. So I'm now qualified in the things that I was sort of doing intuitively in the classroom, I guess. And also I've worked in the online environment. I've worked in the vet sector with plumbers and tried to bring digital integration to what they're doing. And I guess my passions are in the sort of interface between space, technology, and education. So, yeah, it's a perfect job for me.
Wow, it is indeed a perfect job. And what I'm getting from your introduction is you've worked across seemingly, or rather, different works, learning spaces. You talked about plumbing, architecture. You currently have a certificate in learning. And that makes it even more fascinating. I like the fact that you actually went to get a certificate for something you're already doing intuitively. So kind of, why go get a certificate? But I think we live in a world where qualification is a thing. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing about learning is it's so complex, and that's what's so fascinating. Like architecture, it's infinitely interesting and infinitely complex. So I think for me, understanding just the sort of basic learning frameworks was really, really valuable in my job and just in my ongoing thinking about the world. They apply a lot of things beyond learning. So, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to learning frameworks while we're discussing, but to set the stage, how do you define a learning ecosystem, and how does the construct of a learning ecosystem inform decisions around the technologies and the spaces?
So I would define a learning ecosystem as a holistic approach to learning that weaves together physical and virtual spaces. So it recognizes that tools and spaces need to work together wherever students learn, and that cognition, which is very much associated with learning, it's a cognitive process, is a three-way collaboration of the mind and body and environment that you're in. So I guess when you turn up to class, online or digitally, you should have an affordance of space. There's a physicality and spatial to it. You should be able to choose how you interact, how you engage, where you sit, who you talk to when, do you walk in and greet people? You do that in both physical and online environments, and we need to facilitate that. So, with respect to how it informs decisions, our data, some of the things we look at a lot of things, but our data shows that, for example, digital whiteboards have had a lot of uptake in the last couple of years. They do some really great things around collaboration. When you think about that, there's a real physicality to a digital whiteboard when you use a touch screen in a learning environment, in a classroom. And that means that you can synchronously or asynchronously interact with it. And the same information you're working with there appears on your screen, your own laptop, your own device. It also appears on other people's screens at home. So when you think about that, there's a real physicality and spatial integration happening across space and time, and there's an ease of engagement. And so I see that sort of character of learning happening more and more as, technology changes, as software changes, and we need to be able to understand those things and be able to prepare for them and be able to, plan and wrestle with all the fantastic complexity around them. So, yeah.
One of the things I really love about your definition of learning ecosystems is the holistic approach and affordances of a learning environment across different learning cohorts. What would you say are some factors that would contribute to creating an effective learning environment, and what are things you are looking to presently within this realm? Because I know you're currently manager of a learning ecosystems. So I think you're already looking at that space. So yeah.
Yeah, so my team at Swinburne at the moment, and I've only been there for, I think, 4 months, so it's quite new, but my team manage the learning software. They manage the training and workshops around that, and we also give strategic guidance around space planning, integration. So my job is to be across that. So I have to be aware of everything and how it interrelates. So for me, I guess a effective learning environment in this sort of context is one that enhances the presence of the learner and the educator, and ensuring those things are strengthening the human aspects. Like there can be a sort of detachment with technology that we want to overcome as sector, we kind of need to be aware of. And, you know, evidence suggests that a talking head in a corner in a video actually gets more participation engagement than just a video with content itself. So there's all that sort of things that we need to consider. And I guess given that we're going to have an abundance of information, an overload of information, we need to work out how to keep it both, you know, human in all its aspects, human in not the embodiment mind and sort of spatial aspects. I think there is a bit of a, you know, some things coming online about augmented reality, virtual reality, different screens, presence that I think is super exciting to speculate on. So I run a workshop that was looking at, you know, will screens and walls be talking back to us at some point? We'll be having spaces and group work where there's some sort of, you know, Socratic or conversational dialogue happening. What does that look like in the learning space? What does it look like at home or wherever else you're learning? So we're looking to test and prototype and a whole lot of things, and I'm still working through the details of that. But yeah, I think these are some of the things I'm considering.
Earlier on, you talked about when you were discussing the need to go get a certification and something you're already doing, but looking at the learning framework. So my next question is around what frameworks or learning theories are currently guiding the learning ecosystems that you deliver?
There's been a lot of fantastic work done before my time around Dr. Lauriard's conversational framework. It's really well respected. It's got a really fantastic way of categorizing the different behaviors in a space that both translate for me in the online world and the physical world. Like it's sort of like, how do you collaborate? How do you discuss? How do you acquire knowledge? We're going to be doing that for the next, you know, centuries and centuries. How we do that will change, but those behaviors will not change. So for me, that observable behavior happens in a physical space and therefore it allows to assessment, all the rest of it, but you can design around that. So I guess part of our job is giving educators the tools they need to encourage that type of behavior. So I really like that one because I think it really aligns also with what architects do, which is like to cultivate, support humans and behavior in space. And that's, you know, the domestic realm through to the commercial realm. So that aligns quite nicely for me. I also quite like this Venn diagram that David White, who works at University of Arts in London, created around presence, place and pedagogy. I think it's a really wonderful kind of capture. And also we look at research beyond learning frameworks. So, you know, studies show that just yesterday we were talking about someone about polling. You know, polling tools support metacognition, engagement, all the rest of it. And the fact is that research shows students who respond to polls have better outcomes than students who don't, regardless of if they get the answer right. So, I mean, that's really interesting. So I think there's sort of there's a few things we look at in that realm.
That's quite interesting. Just to clarify, were you referring to Diana Lauriard? Is that the same person?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I was like, I know that person. I did study about her. I can't remember the name of the book. This was years ago when I was with Australian Catholic University. That name was very common there. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I have to go update myself with what she's doing currently.
Oh, it's fantastic. There's some really good videos online in that realm as well. Yeah, she did a lot during COVID. It was really great.
Yeah. Awesome. So talking about, you've describe what a learning ecosystem is. We've looked at some factors that you'd consider. You've also looked at some frameworks. So what aspects do you draw upon from your career in architecture? I know you've got an architecture background. So what aspects do you draw upon from your career in architecture and designing educational spaces and your current role as a manager in learning ecosystems?
I guess everything for me is a design problem and everything for me is human-centered. You know, I think I work for some architects who are really focused on making spaces for people, right? So I think learning needs to do that and architecture needs to do it, which is very abstract, but I can potentially talk about some examples later. I guess the thing about architecture, if you're doing public buildings, is you need to be across the holistic, but you also need to be across different scales. So from the very detailed through to the entire urban framework behind it. And that's how I look at the ecosystems as well. It's like if the door threshold doesn't work and you trip on it, you kind of enter the building, right? So, and in the same realm, if urban planning means that the choices of where things go don't work, then the way people navigate the whole realm also doesn't work. So learning is the same. You've got to be really across the details around the UX interface, the data, and the bigger picture of how it all fits together, what sort of affordances and tools you're providing and how they complement each other. Yeah, so the managing complexity. I guess the other thing is I've sort of hinted at is there's a neuroscience aspect, I think, that I'm really interested in right now. So as an architect, and many architects intuitively know how to create space based on observable behavior. So you've got this dictionary in your mind about seeing how people relate to the objects they're around, the things they move through. And lately I've been reading up on the neuroscience behind it. And, it's so fascinating now. Cognitive map, or how we kind of scan space, is something we all do. In our brain, it's the same place as memories are made. So that tells us that learning and place are intricately connected. So I find that really interesting. But I guess to close off that question, I think a well-designed educational and digital space have the same qualities. They're legible, they're invitational, they're accessible, they're engaging, and they're somewhat exciting too. This element of surprise and enjoyment, and they attract people.
Very fascinating answer there. And thanks for sharing that. I think it's quite interesting how you're drawing upon different experiences or different skills you pull from different like architecture and educational design at the moment.
I think I've kind of mentioned upcoming technology. I'm a bit of a futurist, clearly, but there will be that sort of more of an immersion between space and the physical and digital realm will be kind of blurred. And that's part of my role is understanding that. But I think you genuinely might feel like you're in the classroom a bit more moving forward. Yeah, I even just think that ability that when you engage with people, you have a potential presence where they're at as well is really important too. Like if you move something, they should be able to see it on the screen too. If they interact, you should be able to see it. So there's that kind of like bridging. So, good questions. Get back to me in about 12 months.
I will
We're trying to find different things, yeah.
I'm really curious to hear about the test results from you, which you spoke about prior. Now, just to bring us home and just to wrap up this episode, and with everything also looking forward as a futurist, like you mentioned, what is a successful ecosystem to you?
Well, I guess it's resilient, it's adaptive, it's exciting, it's inclusive, all that great stuff. For me, I'm interested in making sure we're creating environments that mitigate cognitive overload. Like I sort of mentioned earlier, there's this sort of excessive information, excessive opportunities, excessive software to use. And I think we just need to make sure a learning ecosystem is more supportive than a burden, if that makes sense. So, and in doing that, I think, getting rid of the digital detritus through personalization, embodiment, more sensory aspects is something I'm curious about. So it should also be, human-centric and student-centric. Students should be drawn to things. And that's an ecosystem problem too, because we need to accommodate students in different environments. They may be learning outside the formal classroom, often attracted to what we call co-curricular spaces, but really anywhere.
That need for inclusive education. Righty, we're going to draw this to a close. I want to say a big thank you to Ellen, who is the manager of Learning Ecosystems at Swinburne University. Thank you for the fascinating conversation. Thank you for showing us how we can connect the dots in different environments, looking at your career in architecture and bringing that into the learning space at Swinburne. Thank you so much for your time today.
I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.